You know where you are?
This is TeamNet TV, Liberia's first online TV station, bringing you the best in internet broadcasting in Liberia. TeamNet TV, backed by the Office of the Vice President of the Republic of Liberia, chief sponsor for TeamNet TV. TeamNet TV, Liberia first.
Hi people, my name is Rose Quebec Cairo. I work in the office of the Vice President, Republic of Liberia, and I love watching TeamNet TV for their coverage because they go beyond the borders to bring you exactly what's happening. Don't miss out. Keep watching out for TeamNet.
Go hey lil' mama, I could transform.
Go ahead, please, quickly. And so let me say to PCK El Frankie that you have won the admiration of the Vice President this morning. She's so much in love with this music. Good morning to everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Daniel Ankara. Good morning and thanks for being a part of the Super Morning Show as always. And so guests appearing this morning as we've been announcing through our social media pages and all of that since yesterday. The Honorable Chief Dr. Jua Howard Taylor, Vice President of the Republic of Liberia. Good morning, Madam Vice President. How are you?
Good morning, and the song is so beautiful because it talks about the sacrifices of mothers, of what they do to get their children through education and to get them to become what they want to be. So it's a very beautiful song. Of course, it's impeller, so it touches my heart even more.
Thank you for coming. It's a pleasure having you. Let me also say that Jay Coverbian will join us very shortly. He will also co-host this interview along with me on this presentation. But my Vice President, thank you for coming. The last time I hosted you, you were a senator then. How does it feel?
Has it been that long?
Yes, it's been that long. It's been that long. It's been that long. But coming from First Lady to Senator, and then to Vice President, how does it feel and what does it speak to, women empowerment?
All three different roles have different responsibilities. As First Lady, you are wife of the President, and your duties are really a little bit in support of his agenda. Unfortunately for me, during that period, we're in crisis, and so I had to go beyond just being a wife, and get involved in some of the things that were happening. I'm happy that I was able to look outside of the box and say, what can I do to help? You become senator, you become especially senior senator. And I want to thank the people of Bong County and the Pella people for giving me such an awesome responsibility. It's allowed me to grow and develop into what I am today. But as senior senator, you become the voice of your people. You must speak about good, you must speak about bad, you must speak about the evil. And so, it gave me a voice across the nation. As vice president, I'm going backwards again because I'm now vice president to the president, who is the driver of all of the policies and the programs, and I play a supporting role in helping the president and the government in the executive, further their aims and objectives. However, I'm a bridge also between the executive and the legislature. As president of the Senate, I must be able to carry those programs and policies that our government has agreed to do and try to work it so that it comes to pass. So I've had three different spheres of experience. All of it have really helped me to grow into who I am today. I think there's still a lot more that I learn every day, but then again, it's a privilege to be able to serve at this level.
There's so much, so much to talk about, and lots of text messages coming left and right. But let's begin from your office as the office of the Vice President. You have have some specific responsibilities as Vice President of Liberia. And I'd like to begin with that, and we come to talk about women issues and violence, and then the pro-poor agenda and all of that. Taking on your office and looking at the task you have to perform specifically as Vice President, how have you been meeting up with your target and your vision, to, co-pilot the ship?
And it's a difficult environment. Difficult because of the economic situation in our country. All of what we hope to do, we have to now cut back because the economic situation is very bad. The funding that Liberia was able to receive in terms of taxes and support have somehow been cut down. UNMIL has left, so a lot of finances have left the system. We're dealing with a lot in terms of looking at a very slowly performing economy. But in the midst of that, you must still, perform your role. And so I have specific roles over the Group of 77, for example.
Sure.
The LMA, I have oversight role over the LMA. I have oversight role over the National Lottery. I'm chair of the One Health committee that deals with healthcare issues, and also the Youth Steering Committee. And so I have about 5 different hats that I must wear at different points in time. I try to do the best I can, and I think we continue to work. Wherever we see the gaps, we continue to talk about it. And again, this is what I have to do in addition to supporting the programs of our government and explaining it so that we are all on one page and we can move together as we did in 2017.
Okay, the Group of 77 to begin with, and then we'll talk a bit about LMA, then we'll also talk about the National Center for the Coordination and Response Mechanism, the NCCRM. Operations at the Group of 72nd, was the way it was when you took office as Vice President. What has changed in terms of your vision to make sure that that place gets better, along with other institutions that fall directly under your purview?
And I want to thank the Executive Director of the Group of 77, Madam Florence Wefa Siafa, who has brought new dynamism to the Group of 77. We have now structured the Group of 77 across the 15 counties. We now have Group of 77 offices across the counties.
Okay.
We have begun a process of identifying our people to know where they are, so that by those numbers we will be able to know what we deal with on a monthly basis. I believe we have about 10,800 members of the Group of 77. Remember now that there are other groups, dealing with disabilities, but I'm solely supposed to deal with the Group of 77. We've also reactivated our farm. The Group of 77 farm, need I say our, the Group of 77 had received some land during the Toba era.
Okay.
We are now farming
Where?
so in Todi,
Okay.
because we thought that we should get to a point where we're able to, do some things for ourselves. I keep saying being disabled doesn't mean you are unable. So the farming project has started. There's a building that we're trying to renovate in this year so that we can begin to do maybe soap making and envelopes, something that will give extra money, because we know we can't depend on government and we can't keep harassing the donors, that are fatigued and keep being stressed over. We have to find ways to be self-sufficient. So under the Group of 77, we did our first farming. We planted corn. We've harvested the corn. They're in the process of having them sold. We're trying to get into rice. There's a program under the Ministry of Agriculture that is dealing also with coffee and cocoa.
Okay.
So we're hoping we can access some funding, so that it can be planted on that land to provide long-term support for that group. So eventually they will be taken care of. We're asking the lottery organizations to begin to hire those who have graduated from college. There's some of them who have master's degrees that are now working. So at least, these are some of the things happening in a Group of 77.
Joining us is Jacob Abien of Renaissance Communications Incorporated, Truth FM 96.1. Good morning, Jacob.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks for the invite. And let me say good morning to our hardworking Vice President, Madam Taylor. I think this is my second appearance in your studio.
Oh wow.
Yes, we were here some time ago when the Shiro's program was to be launched, and I was here again. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Great. And so we continue still on the office, Madam Vice President. What's been happening with LMA, the Library Marketing Association? The court just ruled, and what do you think is the problem with LMA at this point?
And I want to thank the court for making its decision.
Which
How-
you accept?
I have to, as a lawyer, I must accept the court's decision. But maybe, I haven't spoken during the whole period because I know that when the court is in possession of an item, you can't be talking on the radio. It's a general principle. So I was patient enough to wait. I just want to explain, what the process was. I got a large group of women in my office one day. I didn't solicit them. I didn't check on them. My issues at that time was trying to get the group of 77, up and running. And then they began to explain how the LMA was being run without the approval of boards, and that they felt that there were corruption issues at the time. And so I called several meetings over a 4 or 5 month period, trying to get everybody to come together. But those who were gung-ho about corruption issues and that the board was not being consulted, and there are rules that weren't being followed. In the midst of all of that, my suggestion was, let's do an audit since there is now claims and counterclaims of corruption. So everybody would just stand down a little bit to allow the GSC to take over and do its investigation. Then we will know who was responsible, who was not. However, that didn't go well with the people who were in charge, and then it became rancorous. The next thing, I was taken to court, first as vice president and the government. Then the second case was taken as vice president by myself. And then the third case was taken as Joao Taylor, individual. And so you can imagine how many hours our lawyers spent at the courts from the lower level to the top. Fortunately for me, in the process, the GSC, after difficult times getting access to documents and being stopped from accessing the documents, finally were able to do what they did, and they came up with a report indicating that there are very serious systemic problems at LMA. And this was early this year. The LMA took that document to the convention in Zwedru, and the total LMA that comes together once a year as a group decided they would just change everybody and begin a new page because of the level of corruption. The system is set up in such a way as the president of the LMA actually recommends those who will be on the board. And I think that has to be changed because that's the crux of the problem. If the president is determining who the board members are, there is no check and balance. And Daniel and DKB, if you do just a small assessment of the markets across the country, you realize that there are millions of Liberian dollars being collected. However, the garbage remains on the street. The stores, markets that His Excellency President George Manneh has decided to fix, because we can't be 172 years old and you go into our markets and it's still the same, and so we're in the midst of all of this. The court took possession of it and have decided that the law did not provide for the office of the vice president to intervene in such a matter. I know that His Excellency, the former vice president, also dealt with this issue, and some of the same things were done. However, I'm Joao Taylor, and maybe things that happen. Well, sometimes it's a name that people think they can ride on. I think the president of the LMA, you notice she was around the radio talking a lot of negative things, and not saying what, because I had meetings with her many times trying to bring the issue together, which we didn't. Howbeit, the LMA is an organization by itself. It has rules and regulations. After the court has ruled that there is nowhere in the documents, and the court was right, that provides for an intervention of the vice president. However, we are one country, and if there's crisis in any area for which the office of the vice president is supposed to have an oversight responsibility. I think in terms of providing peace and security and keeping things calm, that's why the oversight was given.
Do you remain engaged with them?
Well,
Now
the
that-
issue of the court has just come out. We accept it. We hope everybody now knows what the process is. If the LMA has a problem, continuing problem, they will have to take it to their board. Because DKB, you know, I'm vice president, but there's so much I want to do, positive things, and I don't want to get dragged down into some things that might not be important. What the LMA would do now is in their ballpark, and they have their responsibilities by their laws. Hopefully, whatever issues they had can be taken to their board.
You maintain your oversight.
I'm washing my hands out off of it.
Okay.
I know my point was to show that the information I received was that there were alleged acts of impropriety and that the president and a few members who were on the board were doing things outside of the interest of the LMA.
You think your intervention will avoid of prejudice because many believe that you have some problem with the president of the
Of course not. I'd never met her before.
Okay.
I didn't know her. The first time I interacted with her was when the complaint was brought. And I thought, let's call a meeting and find out what was going on. There are a lot of things said. I mean, again, I'm not going to go through all of that, but this is not somebody I know personally. I had no personal beef with her. The issue for me was if there is a system that is not working properly, I had the potential to bring crisis in the LMA, the largest people across the country. I thought stopping it and intervening would have made a difference.
What does this mean for the judiciary now that a sitting vice president was taken to court and she has to lose a case as well?
I don't know if I lost that case. The judiciary simply said within the laws there was no provision for the vice president's office to intervene. That means the office of the vice president has no oversight over the LMA. And if the vice president's office have no oversight, then they're on their own. And if issues come up, then government as a whole will have to deal with it. And I'm just
Other than the vice
engaging.
president.
Yes.
Interesting. The Supreme Court has instructed that the suspended head of the National Lottery be reinstated. Now, the lotteries also fall under your office. How do you see that in terms of the fight against corruption, in terms of making sure that even if people are taken to court, at the end of the day, they can return to their positions if they come around?
Unlike the LMA, in the documents that created the Liberian National Lottery, the office of the vice president has a specific role.
Okay.
And because of that, I think we have a little bit more leverage. But the law says that a senior member of my office should be able to sit as chair of the board, and the board should be able to operate properly. This government, I believe, will not ignore decisions coming from the court. And I think it is the right thing to do. Those who have been put on the Supreme Court now have a responsibility to ensure that their decisions are fair and that they are just. Because after the Supreme Court, you have nowhere else to go. If the Supreme Court has decided that the tenure clause for those who have tenure in this government is legitimate, in his ruling it said, though the president has ultimate authority over the appointments of different sectors, that authority was delegated by us as the legislature, providing laws that say this person will have this tenure and this person will have that tenure. If we need to change it, then the legislature must look at it and make adjustments in it. And so the Supreme Court has said, based on the existing laws, without prejudice, those who have tenure have tenure. And so for me, I think our government, as I said, will continue to respect the dictates of the court. It is our hope that the board of the LMA will now do what they need to do and provide some leverage for the Supreme Court's mandate to be upheld, and then we can take it from there.
If a government is taken to court and is just losing in manner and form, it appears to me that government is not in right standing sometimes with of the law.
And again, this is government. People might have issues, people might have different sides, but all of us depend on the Supreme Court, who is the final arbiter of issues in our country, to say to one person, you've gone beyond your boundaries, and to the other one, stand where you are. And I think for the first time in our history, people are listening. This government is listening to the Supreme Court. We've had our day in court, but then the simple decision was, if you are not satisfied with the tenure, and there are tenures given to certain people that really should just be under the regular mandate of the president. I believe that there are certain tenures, those institutions that are our anti-graft, constitutional corruption institutions, we call them the integrity institutions.
Yeah.
Those integrity institutions should be protected because we want them independent of any influence of government. And so I think those should be protected. There are about 10 or 11 of them. But I think everyone else should be under the mandate, of the government, so that people are able to be assessed. Some checks and balances can be done. And it says that people can be removed for cause. So even at that, if I were a director or a commissioner of a particular agency, you still have to find cause to have me removed. The president has the right, and it says will and pleasure of the president. But I think the president will be looking for some cause. So it's not just because, Daniel has on a beautiful shirt and I don't like it, then I just remove him. So there are laws that guard the whole institution of governance that I think will continue to uphold
What do you
until the laws are
expect
changed.
the reinstated director now, Mr. Martin Coley? What do you say to him? What do you expect him? Because normally when this kind of thing happen, there's a writ and all of that. So resuming back again, it could bring about continual hoard and pool and stuff like that.
And I believe the board that is over the the National Lottery has a responsibility now to call all of the parties, because this is about Liberia, not about an individual. And if for some reason people think that one person or the other has not performed their duties, the board must make recommendations, and then we'll take it from there. But I believe people should be able to respect the laws of our country. We're trying to uphold our laws. We all say that this is not a country of men, but a country of laws. So it might be a bitter pill now, but in the end, I think it helps us build the governance system that we all need.
Well, to all of you following, as usual, we have several community radio stations that are following this presentation across the country. Smile FM in Zwedru, other stations in Harper and other places in the southeast, western Liberia. And of course, in Bone County, there are several community radio stations that have contacted, us and carrying this presentation live here on the Super Morning Show on ELBC. We turn our attention. We like to move ahead because we can never have enough time to talk about all of the trending issues. But we'll come to issues with women, and let's hit the ball rolling on the issue of the status of the modern mean girls. That's a situation that has touched the hearts of even men in Liberia, on how this documentary came about and how bad it was for Liberia as a country and how our girls were being treated. What is the status of the girls now?
And Daniel, the issue of what happened at the Modern Me is something that happened many years ago.
Sure.
During the tenure of Madam Salif. But government is continuity, and I think when we began, this issue was raised. The Modern Me grouping had gone out to solicit funds. They have a lot of schools across our country that they're operating, but they have one particular school that is of interest. It's the one from, the girls who come from West Point, who come down, walk up the street to go to school and go back. And because of all of the negative propaganda, we lost the funding that could have been used this year to expand and provide additional facilities to girls. Howbeit, there's a new team and headed by Doba Jala as chair of the board under the Hilltop School arrangements, who are trying their best to keep the pieces together. A few days ago, I think about 2 weeks ago, there was a graduation of the girls from 9th grade who had started, early on and had gone through the entire system.
Okay.
Maybe the hope was to turn the 9th grade into the 10th grade and the 10th grade to 11th grade. But because of the loss of funding, we now have 19 little girls who are out of the Board and Me school, now called the Hilltop schools, that need an opportunity to go to school. And when we began this process, I remember we're having the Sheroes conference when a group of Liberian women, maybe more than 500 of them, came to raise the issue. What were we doing? An investigation was commissioned by the president. I think the report is now completed. I hope it will be made public so we can look at what are maybe about a month or so, give or take. I haven't gotten a copy of it, and I don't want to speak to it because I don't have it, but I'll make an effort to get it because we need to see what the recommendations are coming out of it. That's aspect number one. Aspect number two, which is so critical, is how do we get these little girls in school? And I would like to call on this radio station. It will cause, we're trying to get them into RICS, which is a boarding school, which takes them out of the community and gives them a chance to really study and learn without being caught up in a inner city circle. RICS is not a cheap school. I'm hoping that these women who gathered in October of last year will now gather so that we can raise money to send these girls to school. If we need $30,000 or $40,000 over the next 2 years, if we could find 40 women that will give $1,000, that's the money we need. And I'm hoping that when we talk about violence against women and girls, and we talk about the situation where girls are underprivileged and need help, that it will not just be talk when it wants to be a political issue. That all of us will gather together and will raise this money so that when school opens, I think the second week in September, all of them will have an opportunity to go to school. And that's my call this morning, that those who organized those meetings and made it political, the project now is to ensure that they remain in school. Remember, these are girls that are inner city girls coming from West Point, needing an opportunity. One little girl at the graduation said she wants to be a doctor so that she can go and provide medical facilities and help to her community. So you can imagine what is needed to get them out of where they are. And only an opportunity for a sound education will help. So I think this goes beyond us just talking about it. I'm hoping that over the next few days, I will make that call, and hopefully people will come and provide the funding, pay our rates so that we can get our girls.
Because school is about to open a few days from now. I hope we can
Yes.
speed over that.
Well, I hope the women who were raising the issue will now put their money where their mouth is.
But some of the girls, when the whole situation was on, some of them were, directly molested, and some of them,
Stigmatization.
and the stigma is on them. What have you been able to do in terms of just aside from getting them to school, but also rehabilitate them? And
I've been involved in mentoring them over the last year.
okay,
When all of the noise subsided, I had a chance to visit them at their school, provide some inputs for them, tell them that they were not responsible for what happened, but what they do with the experience in becoming better women is what the platform is for them. Fortunately, if you had a chance, and what I'll try to do is get you a copy of the graduation program, and you see the level of education they've received, the confidence they now have to go out and be what they want to be. We now need to go beyond. We've written few letters to some of our donors, MTM for example, who has a female sitting as CEO. We've written letters to a few other persons to see what we can do, again, to raise money to give them an opportunity. I think they're beyond the trauma, because when you see the level of confidence, then you know that whatever happened, women are resilient. And I think they've gone through that. What they want now is a platform to go to the next level, which will be what we can pay them back for a situation that should never have occurred with young girls.
What sort of measures you think must be put in place just to safeguard or to avoid such that happen at that institution?
And we now need
Especially
to
with the
look at the
international
recommendation from the government, what can be done, because More Than Me or the Hilltop schools are in various institutions across the country. How do we now ensure that they are protected, that girls are protected everywhere. And that was just an example of what's happening across our country. How can we now put in place a system where there are people watching? And you know, TKB, I want to, last year, I had a small program with a group of young men from different high schools across Monrovia. And we brought them together, and we'll be bringing them together again to see how we can create these clubs of young boys who can now be watchdogs for their sisters, so that they can, you know, just watch, give us information so that we can know if something's happening to deal with it before it gets to that point. Boys need to take some responsibility. When I was growing up, my older brother, Kolubas is Howard, for example, I was like a puppy to him. Wherever he went, I would follow him everywhere, you know, and he was my role model. And even today, as much as I'm vice president, if he hears something, if he sees something, if he gets a message from me, he will come and tell me, Nene, you shouldn't be doing this. Nene, this one is not correct. So I think boys provide oversight over their sisters, because with all the muff we got, we are still, we still need that protection, because we are women who can be easily molested, we can be easily harassed. So I think the boys in our country, who usually are the perpetrators, whether they grow up or they stay at that stage, must now take some responsibility. I think that is the program I'm going to try to run, so that when we have these schools, that girls must be protected, there should be an eye. If there's a teacher trying to molest somebody, if you can't talk to the teacher, just report it. So we need to create a hotline where that information will come so that we can solve it.
But
and it's a long haul, but I think
take
that's
the
where I
guys
start.
along. So that
Yes, we must take the boys along.
But you know, Madam Vice President, one of the reasons why you're here, let me say that to the public, one of the reasons why you're here, and you specifically spoke to me about that, was the wave of violence in the country. And we start off with gender-based violence, then we come to electoral violence and all of that, then we get into more political issues and talk about the pro-poor agenda. What has touched you with the wave of violence in the country that, you know, has made you to want to speak this publicly about it?
And I think all of us must raise our voices. We have one country, one destiny. The thing about national issues is that it either takes all of us to a better place,
Okay.
or it takes us to a difficult place. Let's look at our history. You know, what has happened from 1980, you know, from the coup, from all of the people who were, some people killed. During the process, we lost maybe 250,000 people. And many of our citizens were forced to leave the country, because no one wants to live in an environment of violence where there's no peace, where they have no hope and no future. And when these things begin to occur, you must think about where we've come from. A lot has been done to help Liberia to where we are. And Madam Ellen Johnson Sirleaf ensured that over the 12 years, regardless of the talking, and today we can talk about it, we're not in the bushes, which is a good thing. So you hear a lot of noise on the radio. But the Rwandan genocide began by people labeling one another. You know, this group is good, this group is bad. And they got to the point where, you know, over a 100-day period, millions of people were killed. We must look at history in terms of where we are. And I just see the level of violence. And let's go back a little bit. Last year, a group of women were paraded in Sino, naked, saying they were witches. But we've banned Sassewood. You know, we've banned a lot of things. You know, so that whole thing just went under the table. I heard even one of those women died. They still don't have a report. I know I talked about it.
I think the high court now became
Okay.
in Grand Bassa.
Good. So we need to make those things public so that people know that something is happening to the women. Because if we keep just sweeping it under the table and then we look at the next thing and we sweep it under the table, then we are piling up for a situation that will not be in control of. Remember, there is no unmail in Liberia. Our Liberian National Police, with the numbers they have, we should be 7,000 or 8,000 in the police, so that every county, you know, has its full detachment. We're not there yet. If you look at the army, they are to protect our borders. So they have nothing to do with the civilian issues we're depending on the police. So if something happens in 20 places at the same time, what do? Violence at MNG Gold, where for an accident that nobody investigated, that whole company was vandalized. We now have another fire. I saw a posting that the school building was put on fire. In the rainy season, I know it wasn't a mistake. So how did that building get on fire? We now have people assaulting 102, I believe, at the police. Gregory Coleman was assaulted. And it seems like it's becoming a norm that people feel that, somehow we can take the law in our own hands. And I don't think the president is happy about it. I don't think the security forces are happy about it. Whatever the situation is, there are remedies. For example, if you work for a company and there are issues with that company, there's a place you can go. There are local officials, superintendent and local officials that a report can go to. And I know the superintendents are very proactive. There are legislative caucuses that are in those counties that if it doesn't happen, you can take it to that level. So there are different places. Some things just have to go to court. So then you take it to the court. If it's a labor matter, the labor officials are available. If it's a civil, people who work in government, they're under the civil service laws. If there's a civil service issue, there is a process. We must be patient to work the process through. That is the only way all of us can live in peace. It cannot always be, oh, I'm vexed with ERBC, you come, you burn ERBC down. It's taking a while for us to even bring up some of our institutions to the levels they are at. And so when you go and you burn a school, your children will not go to school. You burn a police station, there's no police then, because where do we find the extra money to build? So I think people should talk.
But do you think, Madam Vice President, do you think it's because people feel that probably their economic conditions aren't, providing them with what they need? So any little thing brings that sort of, disappointment, and then they tend to want to be violent because
But
that's
you
the
know
only
what
means
that
of
does?
redress.
You know what that does? It scares those who are investing in our country. It scares those who want to come to invest. If you go on the net and you just put Liberia, you will realize that there is all bad news. All. So someone who's sitting somewhere that wants to come and invest in our tourism sector, for example, they will come, they will do their investigation to find out what the system is. Is there a system of justice? So if something happens, they are protected. Is there a system of security that they know they will be protected? And do you think there are no problems in other countries? Every country has its own issues. But we must now know that instead of taking the law into our own hands, there are procedures. If we begin to follow those procedures over time, the systems will get stronger. But if you continue to burn and destroy communities, all we do is scare away our investors.
Madam Vice President,
Let me just say something, DKB. Nothing stops you from talking about it, which I'm happy. The president just ensured that the libel law was repealed under the Abdullah Tukle thing. So anyone can go on any radio station and raise an issue, and many people are listening. You'll be surprised. ERBC has coordinators everywhere. So if there's an issue, someone from Grand Crew, for example, can get on ERBC or send a message to ERBC, and I'm sure you guys will talk about it so that people know. And what you do is you provide an ear for government, especially ERBC. There's a problem here, please go and resolve it. And see if government will not. But if we continue in the way we're going, then we just make our country a country where no one wants to invest, no one wants to come, and in the end, all of us will suffer.
Madam Vice President, many believe that your government came on a popular mandate, and at the time at which you are in power, the rate of violence is even more prevalent. Many will not even believe that it could happen with a government being voted very widely for the first time in the history of Liberia.
And I want to thank the people of Liberia for that vote. What is our responsibility, JKB, is to ensure that we put in place a system of governance, a system of good governance, that we build upon the system that we have currently, and that we begin to look at ourselves not as an opposition party, but the ruling party.
Do you think people in the party are still seeing themselves as opposition, still in the opposition mode?
Well, I think at the party level, there are party officials, and if you look at the CDC as the coalition of political parties, Daniel, after elections, by our agreement, we should have put in place a system where there was a governing council, there was the NEC that comprised all of the political parties in the coalition, and there was a system of dealing with issues, because we have issues. We are human beings. Even in families, there are issues. A father may make a decision that the second child isn't happy with, but the second child might report to the mother, and the mother might talk to the father, or there might be a need for a meeting. And I think that system is not quite in place. And because of that, there are all kinds of issues. I think we must now put in place that system where there will be able to redress some of the issues that we have in the coalition.
Who leads that redress?
Well, the chairman of the party is responsible to put in place that system. Again, the president is involved in governance issues. There are a lot of things going on. That's why we created a coalition of political parties under the CDC. That system needs to be built. People need to have a platform where they can bring whatever the issues are, because we cannot be fighting ourselves. We are the ruling party. But if there are issues that maybe we can't handle, and there are things that seem to be going, in the other way, if we had a process, just like I'm talking about processes across the nation, we must be able to follow those rules and regulations. And I think if that system was put into place, and the national executive committees of all of the three parties had a place to sit and discuss the issues, then we'll have a better coordination. And I think that's what some members of the coalition are calling for. And I think that lies squarely in the lap of the chairman of the party, who is Honorable Molu Bamolu.
Is the coalition ready for him?
We have an agreement for 6 years. And in spite of all the difficulties, I know people keep hearing we need to withdraw out of the coalition. The coalition is now working. It then behooves the chairman of the political party to re-look at how things are going and put things back in place. Because with the 6-year agreement we have, if there are issues and we have a place to resolve it, I think we'll all be happy.
You're also a major stakeholder from the NPP angle, and people like Senator Sandra Johnson have been very vocal, against this administration, and also he comes from the NPP. How do you resolve these issues? And because if the party chairman, Mr. Molu, is not bringing people together, someone has to take that torch.
And maybe that's why the alarms are being blown across the political spectrum for those of us who are members of the coalition. Senator Sandra Johnson is one of the founding members of the NPP. And if you were to call him this morning, he will tell you how many times we have had discussions about it. How do we hold together? How do we ensure that, we are in one boat? But like I said, I think the gap is that the political party has not been fully cemented as it should. So people feel they don't have a recourse. And maybe that's why some of our partisans are taking that posture. It lies on the lap of the chairperson. It cannot be me. I'm on the governing council. The parties must come together and begin to talk about some of those issues. Mind you, there are rules and regulations that we set out before we signed. And so I just want to, call on the chairman of the party. His issue is political. How can we work together? What are we doing? Did the coalition come together as a whole to go to the Monserrato elections? I would say MPP was not called, we're not asked to join, and so everybody stood aside. But that's not the way it should be. We are one body. What can we do to fix it so that we can now go through the 6 years and then concentrate on doing what we have promised to the Liberian people?
Do you still have in place the governing council of that party?
Yes, the governing council is the highest decision-making of the decision-making body of the party that exists. We've not had time to meet as often, but the process is that the National Executive Committee, which comprises the NEC of all of the three political parties, will meet, discuss all of the issues, and then recommendations will be taken to the governing council. So without that particular thing being in place, I don't know what the governing council can do as a body that's on top with requirements as to how issues come to that body.
Because sometimes ago we hear them, but we no longer hear about them. That's why I'm concerned whether it still exists.
It still exists, and I'm hoping that the chairman of the party will now begin in earnest to put the party together. It is his responsibility to do so, he must ensure that the party that is the coalition works the way it should. If he does not take on this responsibility, then who knows?
Quickly, before we go, let me just get one clarity. Recently, a group of women gathered together under the umbrella Women of Liberia. AMTO is an emerging group that presented a statement against some of the issues you are talking about, rape and violence and all of that. During that meeting, AMTO, one of the ladies walked away before the president, and it's becoming a lot of issues around. And I'm thinking if women did that, by not shaking the hands of the president, who they said they must talk to in particular, it became a little concern. Have you got any information about that?
No, I wasn't privileged to attend their meeting with the president, but I remember passing that morning and they were praying on the field and raising their issues. I'm happy that the president agreed to meet with them. Again, if we realize that we're in one boat together, if the president, which is his responsibility, meets a group that has a protest issue, it must be discussed in an environment where recommendations can be made as to how to resolve these issues. And it has to be holistic. Some of the women raised issues that we pick and choose, the issues that we handle. The Liberian Women Initiative is an old initiative that started during the tenure of President Taylor. I remember Mary Brownell and some of the strong women were caught up in that process, and I think this is a continuation of that kind of Liberian Women Initiative that takes into consideration, pending issues in the women's sector, whether it's not enough jobs, whether it's rape, and I think if we begin to be seen as fair and deal with all of the issues, there will be more that will come out of that kind of meeting. And so I'm happy that the president met with them. I'm hoping that whatever recommendations were made when he returns, as he asked them for some time because he was traveling, that we'll look at it and see. The president has a responsibility to secure the peace, to ensure, as feminist in chief, like we call him, that some of these issues reduce. But there are rape issues also. Little girls are getting raped at 2 and 3 years old. We must now be holistic.
Boys are being sodomized.
Of course, that's another issue, because rape and violence is happening across the spectrum. I hope this group will metamorphose into a holistic group, and that they will pay attention to all of the issues, so that we begin to talk about it and go into communities and just calm people down. But when there's an issue, then those issues must be brought to the fold.
But until I quickly, let me just put to work concerning this COP team, the COP, how do you call it?
Council of Patriots.
Council of Patriots issue. Have you had a position since then on that protest?
I'm not a member of the COP. I think as vice president, all of the different groupings that come up with issues must be considered. I think the COP made some recommendations. I think the president has realized that the issue of the economy in our country is critical. How can we grow the economy? How can we ensure that jobs are made available? How can we ensure that Liberians, are empowered? And I believe there's a not workshop. I think there is a convention that is being planned to look at the economy, to look at all of the systems, so that at the end we can begin to do what is needed to be done. I want to say thank you to the COP for one thing.
Okay.
Because I can say to you that I was afraid with all of the noise that went on.
That's why you got sick?
Well, and people can get ill. I mean, there's a lot of pressure, really, in the jobs that we do. And I just, with all of the pressure, my pressure actually went up.
Okay.
But I want to say that the COP was able to bring people on the streets in a calm way. I thought it would have escalated into serious violence, which would have thrown our country back, and that would tip my pressure. But I mean, they went up doing what they had to do, and they were able to, finish and leave the streets, which is their right.
Okay.
So we want to say to people who have issues that we should, try not to be violent about it. You can raise your issues. If government has not handled it, government must now be able to come and say, this is what we are doing. These are the processes. so people know that we're working on it. And I think that's what the executive prerogative is. We'll continue to talk. We'll continue.
You at your office, you kept saying to the guy, "Yeah, take the thing from here," something like that. I don't know how true it is.
Well, the issue was that since I didn't go to receive the petition at the time, they wanted it taken to the office of the president, which is the advice that I gave when they came to see me. I said, well, this is beyond me because I had missed the opportunity to pick it. It needed to be reached to the president's office, which I think is what happened.
If you're just joining us, a reminder that you are following the Super Morning Show on ELBC 99.9 FM, and it's been relayed on several community radio stations, Cape Rock Radio, Hapo, and Voice of Plebo, also extending to Grand Coup, River G, and also some parts of Ivory Coast. And thanks to Bobby Addison for making that possible. Sorry, I'm not ready to take calls yet. Alright, and so JKB is here joining me, Jacob Abian, and I'm Daniel Anka, and our guest is the Honorable Vice President, Chief Dr. Joe Howard Taylor. Well, Vice President, just before we now talk about the proper agenda, we'll also talk about your, position as President of the Liberian Senate and the Legislature. Few clarifications very quickly, and you talked about the party, not trying to shoot itself in the leg, getting out of the opposition mode. It's still been rumored in some quarters that your office is not receiving the required support. It's still being rumored that at some point you wanted to resign as Vice President of Liberia. What can you say to that? Is the office being supported as it should be? And did you at any point in time, make an attempt or decide to resign?
The issue is that there are financial difficulties all around. I know the Minister of Finance sits in a very hard seat. There were some things I wanted to do over the last year that I wasn't able to get funding for. Only because of the lack of funding. There are some things that I believe that should be done automatically to assist the office of the Vice President. And I've raised those issues at the different levels. I'm hoping that this year will be a little bit better. But we need to grow the economy. We need to ensure that somehow there is a financial system in place that will do some basic things. And thankfully I've had some meetings with the Minister of Finance about it. And I think we cannot wash all of our dirty clothes in the public. It doesn't help me. It doesn't help my office. It doesn't help our government. And so those issues have been raised. I'm hoping that as we move along and things get better, they will be resolved so that each of us will be able to achieve our goals that we have. For example, we have issues with traveling around the country. There are times that I stay, in Monrovia, so it's easier. But when we travel to meet constituency members, we need funding for logistics to go out and do what we need to do. And so again, as a part of this government, I will continue to request what I need to do my work, but I also need to help in a way to see what can be done to bring additional people to the table where we can raise additional money. But I think we're in a process of discussing these issues. I hope that this year, this new budget year will be a lot better.
And at no point you considered resigning?
But people get frustrated, and I think the issue of resigning was tied into the whole COP. That I was blamed for providing support to the COP. A lot of my sons are in the COP. Darius Dillon, Benjamin Sambi.
Senator Darius Dillon.
Yeah, Senator Darius Dillon. I'm so sorry. I always call him Darius Dillon. So I hope this isn't in any way disrespectful to him. So there were some critical people for my office. I've seen to be able to grow new leaders. And when you grow them, at a point as a mother, you got to let them go. From Edward Kafia to Marvin Cole to Senator Darius Dillon to Senator Yala. I've been instrumental in getting the younger generation in a position, and sometimes I wonder if it's a curse or a blessing. But how be it, some of these people were involved heavily in the COP. And so some members of the ruling party felt that I had some influence over them. And I was just a little bit overwhelmed, and I said, well, you know, this is just too much. I don't have any control over them. And I was very careful not to get engaged, because just what I was trying to avoid is what ended up. Oh, she controlling the people. I mean, where do I get the money from to control people? You know, I'm looking for money to send girls to school.
So you actually considered it?
Yes, let me be truthful about it, that, you know, I was a little bit overwhelmed,
Okay.
and I thought, you know, that I was just under just too much pressure on too many issues, and
So
in
was
that
it?
frustration, which is a part of life, you know, I was again spoken to about from many sectors, including the Liberian Senate, that they assumed me to be a strong woman, and that irrespective of the difficulties, I still should be able to balance it. But we all, you know,
You turn
have
with that
our
now.
difficulties.
Of course.
Mind you, I've been in government for more than 20 years. Some people just starting. So from the whole stress of the Charles Taylor era to the whole stress, you know, I was an opposition member in Madam Salih's government.
Sure.
So it's been one stressful period, and you know, I just got a little bit overwhelmed.
Let's talk about the relationship. You get to stay rumors all over the place about your relationship with the president not being very cordial. Even the church has to talk about that.
Well, I'm happy the church has been praying. There has been a lot of interventions, and I think softening of the grounds. I'm praying and hoping that we'll continue to work together as we did in the campaign, so that the promises we made, if you remember the campaign, I was at the forefront of it, saying that we needed a chance to work and to transform Liberia. And so women always have to bend over a little bit backwards, and I will continue to do so. I will continue to support the agendas. Those who are in government will know that if I have an issue, I'll make noise about it in private, because it's not expected that as vice president I will sit on this radio and say all of the things that we're discussing. But there's a lot going on, and I think our president needs all of the support. When I agreed to be vice president, you know, I agreed to support, which is where I still am. And we'll continue to talk in private about some of the issues that need to be adjusted. And in the end, he has the final decision making to look at everything, because maybe my position might not be in the general welfare of the country, and we are not perfect, all of us. So I think my responsibility is to continue to work, continue to bring down the tempo, so that our
Is
country.
he accessible to you at will, to meeting him on the national issues? Is that the case?
Well, we continue to work. I mean, I don't think I should go to the president's office every single day. You know, if I have an issue, we should be able to talk about it. And I think the situation will continue to get better. I will continue to do what I need to do, so that my conscience, you know, is clear.
With the situation with the Bond County Superintendent, what is your relationship with her? I mean,
You know, the Bond County Superintendent, I go back 20-something years. She has been a key member of my campaign. In 2017, we made her chairperson of the Coalition Women Caucus.
okay.
She went across the country. You know, she campaigned in very difficult places. She brought women together, and she's an asset. What happened in terms of the recordings that came out? Again, I can't speak for why she went into such detail about what has happened. But for me, I believe as superintendent of the county that I come from, you know, whatever has happened, we need to work together for the good of our county. The issues raised bordered on my security, you know, that there were all these machinations. And maybe out of the investigation, the security people have a report on it. I haven't seen it yet. But I think she's been reinstated by the president, which is his right, looking at issues that he might have at his disposal that I don't.
Okay.
You know, I look forward to continuing to work, and I pray that she will continue to lift up Bond County and help us to develop the way we should. It's not personal. I
You
don't
met
think
her
it's personal.
since the release?
No, we haven't. But I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, Madam Vice President, as broad as a question it may seem, but how do you see so far the Popo agenda for prosperity and development making an impact in under 2 years, so far? What is your overall, view of the agenda as your government's working to?
We have an agenda, the Pro-Poor agenda, and I have a simple explanation for it. Working to make Liberia better for Liberians. That's how I see it. Because it's to address the issues of the poor, and lift them up out of the level of poverty that the majority of our people face. So there is an agenda, there's a document that breaks down all of what we should be doing. And I think over the past 18 months, some things have happened, that we have to look at, whether it's the $25 million or, the $16 billion, or the level of perceived corruption in some instances. All those things have to be looked at. Remember, we are a new government coming into power, struggling with issues. There are some issues that this government is dealing with that came from the previous government. For example, the issues of, and let me use the healthcare, the Ministry of Health. Funding we're giving to the Ministry of Health for different programs. And because funding was slow from government, I believe if they had an emergency issue, they would say, well, let's use this money that's come from the pool fund to solve this issue, and when we get our allotment, we pay it back. In the international community, it seems as mismanagement of funds. Because if you give me funds for pencils, and if something happens that, if you don't have teacher in the classroom, pencil will not be effective. So you could say, well, let's get our teachers in place, and then by the time government gives us the funding, we'll put it back. Sometimes it doesn't happen that way. And so there are a lot of those issues that we're dealing with now. In health, in education, in the agriculture sector. That is not the way governments should run. But even in your home, you have money that you're saving for tuition fees. If a child gets sick, what do? You say, well, let's use someone else, we'll put it back. You are hopeful that before school opens, you'll get it back. Sometimes you don't. So when people see all of this and they see all of the reports coming from the UN system, I think this is what this situation is. That across the board, some things were done like that. I think our president has taken care of finance and development planning. We'll be making a very strong statement as we go into the 2019-2020 budget, that there should be no instance where this is done, and that we should try our best to manage within our means. However, if you talk to all of the sector ministers, you will find out that there's something missing in the budgets. Operational funding, which is supposed to be for emergencies. I'm hoping that the national legislature that is now looking at the budget will find operational funding, because that's what the operational funding would do. So if there's an emergency, it can be taken care of. So people don't have to go.
But I'd like to interrupt you at this point. But how do you appease partisans of the collaborating parties vis-a-vis, ensuring that government has operations? Because at some point, people look at appeasing partisans who supported the party versus, if we can employ as many people as we can find other than having money for operations. And it's political and it's also economical.
Well, I disagree, Daniel, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Government should not be in the business to hire everyone. Really, it's not possible. And if we keep that in mind and say government has to employ everybody, we'll get a bloated salary, which goes beyond the capacity of our LRA to produce. And then you have a situation that we're having now, that salaries are delayed. So in as much as we're trying our best to bring, partisans on board, there's a budget. And if you go and you send the office of the vice president has a set number of persons, I will not go and hire 100 people more, because how would they get paid? Except I reduce the pay of everybody else in my office to accommodate them. Without that being done, I have a set amount of money that's given for salaries. So we now need to become a little bit more innovative. Agriculture is a sector that has immense possibilities. How can we now get our young people? Daniel would bring in pepper from Guinea. Pepper. And I don't care how rich you are or how poor you are, pepper is cooked in every home in Liberia. Some people, like the Loma people, will eat more. The other people want small, but pepper cooked in every home. How can government now begin a new process of being innovative? Let's create the lands all over all our country, the whole country in forests. How can we now begin to get our people to get some seeds, give them some land? Let's go plant. You can make, we're ordering tomatoes from Morocco. Can we now get a group of young people to go grow tomatoes? Let the supermarkets buy it. Let the restaurants buy it. There are other ways to get our people employed. But if we think we'll put everybody in the system, we'll now have to have a situation where we'll not be able to get paid. Things that need to be done, operational funding will not be done. So we must look outside of the box, and see what we can do instead of saying somebody has a place for only 100 people. We send 200 persons there, it will not work.
I like to ask. There's one word that's across almost every front page of newspaper and headlines of radios is harmonization, and that is what we're talking about now. And this people see this Some people see this harmonization as a direct means of cutting pay, or cutting salaries. Others see it as a means of harmonizing salaries, and bringing them together, putting people in categories. How do you see it, given your perspective, not just as vice president, but as president of the Senate now? I'm dragging the legislature behind you.
And the legislature is responsible to ensure that at the end, whatever budget is approved will be their responsibility. We must look at the fact that most countries around the world actually put people in categories. And then they look at education and experience. So as you're harmonizing, you must also look at the experience of these people. As you're harmonizing, and the World Bank is trying to help us put our budget in perspective, what it is we can afford. How can we operate government in such a way that things will go smoothly? So it's important. Madam Salif did I think upsizing and downsizing exercise, and then she laid off those who were at the retirement age to provide space to maneuver. And I think we need to look at it holistically. However, government has brought its dimension for what they believe we can do. Trying to keep in line, trying to harmonize, trying to set a standard where every year, if you work and you do your testing and you have a good review, you can go up so that people have a chance to go up in the system. However, it's now at the foot of the legislature. I'm praying that they will do all of the proper analysis so that at the end, we are able to achieve our goal. What is the goal of government? To put people in categories because it's the best way to look at civil service, to ensure that people who have certain qualifications and experience have better pay, to make sure that those at the lower level are not pushed lower. Because you have to remember that there are some people who make so small an amount that if you say you are reducing everybody across the board, they will suffer even more. We must look at, and let me just we'll look at the fact that there are some people who have very high brackets. There are some members of the people who are in commissions and at certain agencies outside of the civil service that make a lot more. And I think we need to look at all of that, how we could bring people together, bring those who need to be come down, those who need to be stabilized. Fortunately for us, the process we are undergoing secures the security forces. Their salaries are being helped. It secures the nurses. But then there are administrative people in the Ministry of Health whose salaries as Controller General, for example, were cut from $5 to $2. We got to look at all of those things because we don't want a system where after you've trained people to be able to take care of these systems, they all leave and go to the international community and we are back with a brain drain. So I think the legislature should take its time to look at all of these things so that in the end, we have a system that is affordable, that people feel good working for government, and that there's a hope, that as we move along, things will get better.
I'm asking in line whether it is feasible this budget year, or we could look at it this year and have prepared for the next term.
And I think that's a responsibility of the legislature. They must look at what our revenue streams are, knowing that we've lost a lot of revenue in iron ore and rubber. We now need to find new sources of income for our country. And that could take a year before things, get back on track. What do we do in this budget year? Again, what needs to be done is taken as a proposal to the national legislature. So we have to put them on the hot seat. What is it you are doing? What are you seeing? There are two committees, Ways, Means, Finance, and the Budget. I believe if you're able to call them to ELBC to come and explain a little bit more about what's happening. So a lot of people are worried. Oh, what will happen? We're not even getting paid now. What's going on? How will it be? some new explanation needs to be given so that people are clear as to what the parameters will be. So I would like to ask you if it's possible to call the chairpersons of those two committees, because the budget
Normally
is now.
during these periods, it's very, very difficult to
It
happen.
is
But
important.
we'll try as well.
It will be important, even if that means you have to go and have an interview with them.
Sure,
I believe we have a responsibility to inform our people of where we are going and encourage them so that people can be secure where they are. If there is an issue that is something that is burning, how do we say, my people, this is where we are? We need to build. Be patient. It will get better. We'll all do A, B, C, and D. And I think that's the responsibility of the legislature that actually represents our people.
Let's talk about health and education combinedly. Let's see how you've been able to assess the both areas, because too many crowds are coming around those areas. People not being paid. A lot of issues unfolding. The health sector is broken down, as we hear.
And let's talk about education first, because I think we're no longer at a mess stage. We are gradually getting better. If you look at WACS that was taken this year, you realize that Liberia as a whole did much better. But what did the Ministry of Education do? They made a plea to the president and asked him to please provide money for tutorials, because it's possible that some of what the others are learning, we have not yet strengthened all of our systems. And so they did the tutorial for a couple of months. As a result, many children passed. It wasn't like we did before, where almost the whole country was failing. So I think this system is getting a little bit better. We still need to provide vocational and skills training like we had when we were growing up, so that young people learn some skills. That needs funding. Hopefully we can get some of our development partners to help us strengthen. We need computer labs that are internet ready at all of our schools, especially the public schools. Daniel, you'll be surprised to find out. I want to thank him for his leadership in not retaliating, knowing that he was a woman. I think Senator Yomni Kanga has also apologized for her outburst
on Facebook.
That she was just a little frustrated with the situation. What we must do, those of us who preside, and I always say the formula for peace is just fairness. In the end, the Senate will take a decision on that recommendation that comes from someone. There are many instances somebody will come up and put their hand up and say, well, this is what I want. They will say, no, we're not going that way. We'll get a new motion. But I think the presiding officer has to preside in a way where everybody has their voices or their opinions said or heard, and then you give the body a chance to decide. It's not about fighting. Unfortunately, in other legislatures around the world, people actually take stick and fight each other. Thank God we have not gotten to that point. All of us must realize that we are called honorable people, and that there is also a recourse in the legislature. If something goes wrong that you are not satisfied with, you can write another letter and say, well, I believe this was not done properly. Can we discuss this again? And I think all of us need to be patient to show you that the temperature of Liberians are getting higher and higher, and we need to try to find a way to bring it down. So I'm happy that Senator Lawrence actually apologized for her outburst. I'm happy that Senator Sir Joseph, who is a friend of Senator Lawrence, I think has agreed. I don't know what the Senate will do on Tuesday, but I believe it's just an example of how we must calm down and look at things the way they should. I'm hoping that lawmakers, and I have a problem with that, with my lawmaker. We had a chance to talk about it here on the weekend. You have the Senate floor. The Constitution protects anything you want to say. I've seen some tapes on the U.S. Senate. So now when people are talking, one of the recorders there, you can talk for 5 hours, be doing your talking, other people doing other thing. When it's time to vote, everybody come out and do their voting. So people should be given a chance to discuss issues. And at the end of it, we come to a position that allows all of us to operate. So hopefully, we who are national leaders will exhibit the patience and the fortitude that we need as we navigate these difficult waters.
You don't count that a violence at the highest place of government?
And that's why I said we are honorable people. We should, the honorable House of Representatives. Our actions, our inactions sometimes things are serious, we just ignore it. Our behavior towards one another must always be cordial, because we set the basis also for how things will be. And there could be some hot issues, that somebody got. Sometimes they will not talk in the Senate floor, they go on the radio. It just, spoil everything. Whereas you have a recourse, once you are an elected official, where you should be making those interventions, it's on the Senate floor and having the issues resolved instead of, sometimes you come on the radio, you talk something, nothing happens. Because where you should be accessing a change is not where you do it. So all of us, if you look at my life over the past 20 years, and each of you, somebody like JKB and Daniel and some other, people who've worked with me over the years, it gets hard sometimes. I get crazy sometimes, but I try my best. Every time I come on the radio, or every time I go in the public, even if I'm saying something that people don't want to hear, I say in a soft way so that people don't think it's forced. As we all engage each other, there are political differences around the table. How do we come together for the good of our people is where all of us must be.
Concerning by-election, from a different perspective now, the Cape Mount by-election is pending. The CDC lost the Monserrato seat. The District 15 issue is still is up for a rerun now. I heard Mr. Kamara and his team, Abu Kamara and his team, have agreed to go for the rerun instead of taking it to the Supreme Court. But what do you think is responsible? Do you see as people consider it to be probably the coalition is getting unpopular, or is it that the popular mandate is not being listened to now? When put people's hands up and say, we're supporting this person, or the party is supporting this person. How do you see it?
And there are two angles for that. First angle is that whatever lessons that this coalition needs to learn, we need to sit around the table and find out where we are, where we are going. How do we continue our mandate? And that mandate can be extended, to some of the elections. But we need to sit in house and figure out, where we actually are. The second aspect of it is that regardless of who you are, even if you are a candidate of the ruling party, we are the ruling party. You must exhibit peace, calm. You must talk to your people. So no situation like that occurs. Daniel, it's just one election. I was sad with the way things blew out of proportion. And I'm really hoping that on whatever day the Election Commission has set aside, I think Thursday, or whatever day they've set for
10 days, but I think they're going by order again to set it up.
Okay, so it doesn't take a long time. Whatever the day is, people should go out there, campaign in an environment. I know in 2017 we're giving special places to go. No two parties should have been in one place. I don't know how the schedule was done, because if it's done that way, then you have a chance where party A will go and campaign. You can the next day you do your own campaign, so there should be no conflict. But I think both parties in district, or all of the parties that are in District 15 elections, should try to talk about peace, try to keep their people calm. People should go to the polling centers, watch their ballots, watch their votes, and whoever wins, we move on. CDC is the ruling party. I mean, can we be gauged by each seat we win? Yeah, I think it shows our strength. So if we seem to be having some issues, the party should now come in-house and see what needs to be done.
Quickly, Dan, two issues I'm sure you want to go through the line. The July 26th oration by Lehman Bowie, I'm sure you want to touch on that, because it's becoming a little bit the way it's going now. People respond the other way.
How are you going?
Disadvantage you. Your position. You hear all the clarification are coming. But let's talk about
and
the
I'm on
disadvantage.
Facebook, so that the problem is it makes you crazy. So there's some things I might not know.
Let's talk about the disadvantage. You say you want to talk about the oration that just passed.
Oh, no. I mean, the thing is that it was a prerogative of government to choose someone. And I believe that the orations that we do at that day, or on the or on August
July 26th.
July 26th and August 24th. Those are the two, national days for which, we can now hear the views of others. And the orator was chosen, given a chance to speak. From her perspective, that is what she saw. Daniel, let me tell you what happened to me in 2014, and just as a way of dealing with this issue. It was a really tough race.
Yeah.
Very tough, very tough, very tough. And I asked someone from my office who was on the campaign team to please sit and listen to the radio. And I told the person, if those around you always say, all right, oh, don't worry, all right. Maybe you might not hear the outside. So I asked someone to please sit on the radio, and whatever negative thing was said by the opposition, they should please write it down. They were a little confused. Why should we write it down? I said, just write it down for me, I beg you. Because in my mind, I knew that if I just listened to the people around me, I would think everything was fine. An opposition member or someone who has a different view will say how they feel. That was a guideline for me. By the time they say, oh, they want me here 9 years, she ain't been to Jawa. The next weekend, I went to Jawa. Yes. Sometimes we need to look beyond the message and find out what is it. Maybe there are some things we haven't been doing. And that should give us a guideline. For me, that's how I took it. That there were issues that we need to look at. And we all know the economic situation is not correct. You know, there's some things, you know, that government needs to work on. So if you look at it the way I look at it in 2014, it's not something to be angry about. That was her oration, which she had the right to do, and it gives government a chance to reflect. You should never always hear from the people around you, because I want to talk about Charles Taylor. He was in a bubble, and I realized that he was in a box, and that the people who come to that table and give advice, they got their own personal interest. Oh, Chief, don't mind the people. But there was a lot happening outside. And we didn't pay attention. Today he is now in the Hague for 50 years. Have we maybe listened to some of the noise from the opposition? Because the opposition, they will always say how they feel. And you know, if they lie, then you go say, okay, the person not telling the truth. But you must look at it as a way of helping you develop. Maybe they will speak about what you might not hear if you're in a bubble. And so for me, that's how I took that oration.
Quickly before we take us, do you have any interest in the 2020 race in Bond County as to who you may want to, you know, throw your weight behind? It's long term though, but it's not that far. Then.
And it's not far. You know, the Bond County has always been. Honorable Marvin Cole used to say to me, if you work in Bond County and you can succeed there, then you can succeed in Liberia, because it was the most contentious county. He said, but if you work in Sanoye, where you coming from, and you can succeed there, then of course you can work anywhere. Because Bond County is always I think Bond County is more highly political than Montserrat. There are a lot of interest tied into many things. The opposition will be standing their ground. Other people will be trying to find where they can stand. And I've said it in many places. Fairness is the only remedy for peace and security. If everybody goes through the process and they feel that they are fairly treated, then you don't have all these things jumping out. There are 2 senators. I believe the intent of the law was to provide an environment where 2 senators come from the 2 different sections of the county. Because you got representatives that will come from everywhere else. And that's a different issue. Because we need to set the constituency number. There are bigger counties that got less seats and smaller counties that got more seats. So we got to find a way to harmonize it. Because people should be represented. The Constitution says we should set the number. It shouldn't reach more than 100. So we need to set it. But I believe that as the counties decide, there should be upper and lower, so that both sides are represented. There are some counties that there's some segments that have never been represented over time. And I think Bond County should begin to look at it. Not because I come from the lower part. I'm no longer a senator in Bond County. And it took me a while to get to that point, to agree to just let go small. Because I mean, my heart, my soul, everything I have is stuck in it. I must now, you know, be able to extend hands to other counties as vice president. But my eye is on Bond County, and all I'm saying is we should not elect 2 senators that come from the upper part of the county, because the lower county will have no voice. And let me give you one mathematical issue that makes me say this. If you look at the 9 representatives, 7 representatives and 2 senators from Bond County, you realize that almost 4 of them come from the upper part. The 4 people come from the upper part, and the 2 senators come from the upper part. When it's time to vote, what will happen? Everything will go up there. Phoebe, Carrie, Cottington, Bond Technical College, Banga Rose, everything goes up there. Because in the end, when y'all go for, they'll say, no, they think y'all way small. The other part of the county is always left out. Where is that voice? You only got 2 persons that come from there. Are you voting? The 7 boy not bad, or the 5 boy not bad, the 7? The 5 boy will always win. So I think in all of the counties, as we look at developing and giving voice to our people, when the voting is taking place in 2020, if there's already a senator sitting here, I'm not talking about those who are running. I won't look for no trouble this morning on members of the Liberian Senate. I think from where I sit, we should be looking holistically at what grows our country. What are the things that we must now begin to do, and, you know, to certify the peace and stability that we need. That if there's an area that is unrepresented, they should get that voice, because when it comes to making the decisions in the county and the voting is taking, some people will be crying because nobody speaks for them. So I would be hoping that the lower part of the county can come up with one person that everybody can support. I only have one vote. I don't think I will be involved in the 2020 elections like that, going from county to county. We need to allow the people who are running to go and campaign with the people. However, whoever wins will begin to work. But I think if there are some gaps, then we'll continue to have all the noise.
What was your decision around the Bon Ridge County, the split of Bon County at the time?
Bon County, we are lucky that Bon County for Bon County people. You know, there are other tribes, but we are predominantly from Bon. It's our county, regardless of whether you come from Fuama, that behind Kakata, or you come from Jowa, that near the Guinea border. We are Pele people. I don't think we should split. It's just another formula for disconnecting our people, and I will not support that.
0880-0776-089.
And they're listening to you this morning.
And there's a proposition in the constitutional review that we didn't talk about as it relates to that. But we began talking about additional seats for women, which is a consideration, looking at everything. We think these recommendations, if they are put into place, will take place in 2023. So if we are talking about additional seats for women, you know, it will be 2023, not 2020, because we need to raise money and do all of that. But we also decided that when we began the process, the people living with disabilities, and I know Biancota are listening to me, there is a law that allows them 2 seats. So we're trying to lift that in the constitutional thing. We're also looking at young people who can also maybe have 1 or 2 seats. So that's the configuration of the new legislature. Hopefully it will pass. But I want to talk about the people on drugs. A lot of our children are. I found out the other day that in the elementary schools, people are taking tramadol. Small children, 8-year-old, 9-year-old children. People putting marijuana in kanya, in soup. So people go to a party, your child, that thing they drink, go soup, and they end up on drugs. There's a huge problem. I've asked the Ministry of Health to please conclude the recommendations, making health ministry responsible for importing tramadol. Remember, there was a huge issue with the tramadol. And when your child on tramadol, you will not even know, because the marijuana scent, you will smell it. So some people on tramadol, parents don't even know. So I'm asking them to conclude that before school begins, so that the Ministry of Health will be responsible for bringing in tramadol. It will be at a particular place. If you get a recommendation for it, we can trace it to a doctor or to a hospital. So it's not all over the streets. If somebody is bringing tramadol, which I believe that people bringing tramadol and using it now as the drug of choice, they are destroying the lives of our people. So we begin a process with Gentry Taylor and a group called the Agents for Change, who want to help build a rehab. Because that's another issue. We can talk to them, we can counsel them. If there is not a drug rehabilitation center built that will deal with the issues, my dear, we are still running the wheel. The Ministry of Health is trying to get the group of Lebanese Cultural Union to build one. The president also is looking at one. And we're also looking at one in Bomi. The Bomi people gave us about 45 acres of land. So we have to build a rehab as we do all of this. So this is why I've been going across to some of those inner cities to talk to them and encourage them. But we need help in finding someone who will help us build these facilities so we can begin to deal with those issues. I'll also be going across the country to elementary schools and talking about what drugs do to the brain, how parents can see whether their children are on drugs or not. And that's a whole campaign. I think it's a war. Those who are bringing drugs in our country, we need to change the drug laws so that those who bring drugs and you are arrested is not bailable. Because I believe if you give a child a drug to destroy their lives, it's tantamount to you trying to murder that family or to murder that child. So I'll be looking at the legislature to try to conclude how we can make the people who get arrested for drugs a non-bailable offense.
Good morning. Let's take the first call. Good morning.
Good morning, Daniel.
What is your name? Go ahead, please.
You are listening even GA in our corporate district. That district was running towards President Chief Dr. Chua Howard. I think you have spoken adequately about some issues in our district of those problems. And I think it's a time that many problems that in our society. Because it's not easy. Things present are skyrocketing. So my own recommendation to you this morning, Madam Vice President, 1 year, 3 months, people continue to cry, people continue to suffer, and these are not good parts of our country.
Thank you.
If this government
Go ahead, please, quickly.
Thank you. I got two questions quickly about that question. We've had an issue as it relates to electoral violence. Do you think this actually forces threat to the peace process in Liberia, because we got 2023 coming, we got 2020 also just next door? The next question is, what is the relationship with Mr. President, your very good friend in the Senate?
Thank you very much. Two questions that have been addressed already. Go ahead, please.
Let me thank Madam Nambe, Vice President of the Republic of Liberia, for doing our favor for highly estimation towards the Liberian people and our humanitarian and our hard work towards the Liberian people. Madam Vice President, you visit us this morning. I listened to the Vice President and she spoke well. And actually, these are the people we need in our society, because we can go anywhere to put our name on top people for such a people like the Vice President in your office this morning. Madam Vice President, we could pray for long life and prosperity in your political.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Let's take the next person. Good morning.
And good morning to the country man in Liberia.
Go ahead.
And this is the boss of Abraham Political Magistrature. I call for the Bible Avenue in Joe community this morning.
Go ahead.
And we appreciate the output of the Vice President of the Polagram and the Flower Still. And he spoke legibly. On the Vice President, one thing I said, I very agree with you that it be my imagination that we need to change the drug law to be non-beatable effect. And I'm appealing to you to see how they can work with your boss, President George Manuel Weah, to see how they can stabilize the United States rate so the unity level can be re-elected for a better state here. Thank you for bringing the opportunity to get and make Mama Labra a better place.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, sir. Please go ahead. Sorry, my brother. Time is of the essence. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning.
When you started that intervention, for some of us, we appreciate it. These are people, when there are things are happening in other sectors, when state actors remain mute and relax on it, these people, they try to get us to come for worship. Well, it's surprised me for them to put another version of the unique intervention that you made. Whatever the case, the Lord has taken its course. But what I want to say to each and every one of us, we need to reveal respect for leaders. We need to respect leaders in this country, because leadership comes from God. Thank you so much for the Vice President.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. I'm Boris Addison, calling from my relay station in Monrovia.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Madam VP, thank you very much for the deliberation. I want you to please use the best that can your influence. This morning, the management of ELBC will be going out to defend the budget. State radio ELBC, as we speak, 90% of the substations are off. And it is my influence, the radio station that's set up to inform the people on what the government is doing. Because ELBC is preaching the message, or the messaging that you preach is ELBC that's sent out to the listening public across the country. And those substations are off, and the ELBC is not bothered except I use my radio station to have it on now. As you speak, people are listening to you in the southeast and other part of the country. So please, I will not continue with this. I'm going to please help us to let ELBC budget be touched. And lastly, Topman University in Maryland County strike action is taking place there now due to budget cut. And the workers of this also are saying that they are planning to cut down the salary. Please do the best that you can do your influence to make sure that those issues are addressed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll take two more, then we come back to the First Lady before we wrap. Vice President. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Madam President.
Good morning.
I'm Oscar calling from Jiburu. Now, President, I have three questions.
Vice President. Yeah, go
about
ahead.
education sector. And most of our citizens of this country, we are not educated to that extent. And all of the private schools in this country have had that education. And then the second part they can comment, why are your government doing the work?
Thank
The
you.
second thing I have to do
Okay.
with the economy. And the president, we have been seeing on the
Vice
street,
President now.
on a daily basis, we will see the teaching rate is just going on gradually. As we are speaking now, the teaching rate is almost 212. What the government is doing the work is.
212?
People are crying.
220.
Then the economy of this country,
Yeah, I mean-
we have a foreign national who just comes
Except for
and say they
P4.
are this country are people just. But when the people are good, are in the store, then they go and reach the person. Why the government is doing the work is.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Okay, the questions are piled up now, and so I'd also like you, as you answer, Madam Vice President, to include the First Lady was here last week. She appeared on the Women Let's Talk program, and this issue came about her relationship with you. And I listen. I like to get your perspective. What is your relationship with the First Lady? You can also include that as part of, some of the things you address before we wrap up.
So you have to tell me what she said, and unfortunately I wasn't.
No, I mean it was rumored that there is not a good relationship between you and the First Lady,
No, that's not true. That's not true at all.
and that was her similar response.
Yeah, it's not true at all. I think we've exchanged ideas. Even with all of the rumors concerning my relationship with the president, she's been involved in it. When she hears something, she'll call me and ask me. So I think we have a very good relationship. I've supported all of her initiatives, and she's done the same for me. When we launched the Jewel Starfish Foundation last year to provide opportunities for girls, she made a very generous donation. And whenever she's launching her programs, I try to make a donation. So I think we're working together. She just has different issues that she's dealing with, but if we need to interact, we always do. So I think I have a very good relationship with the First Lady. And the second issue is the private school fees. As I said earlier, there are countries now that are putting everything they have in public schools because that's where their people are. I think we should look at our subsidy policy and put it into growing our public schools and making it better. You could not, in the 1980s when I was going to school, most of the big schools, CWA, St. Patrick's, when they got people coming from 12th Street, Tottenham High, we had to study. You can't take it for granted. Most of the time they were beat in debates, beat in all kinds of things. And then they had skills training at Tottenham High. So the guys and girls that came from there were not small people. They used to make private school students very afraid because they were knowledgeable. And I think because that's where most of our young people are able to go because the parents don't have it, we need to now work in ensuring that our public schools are brought up to par. If we do that, you can imagine how many people move for in private schools because the private schools are just that private. There's nothing you can do about it. They are for-profit organizations providing educational systems. So, I mean, you can't tell a private school, don't charge $5. But we can harass our government, harass the legislature, so that they can begin to put in place a program to upgrade the public schools. And they have huge facilities. Look at GW Gibson. We can have morning and afternoon school there, sir, so that we can begin to really train our people. I mean, because I can't tell a private school what to charge. They need to harass government more. Let's fix our systems.
You can talk to them to do something about their fees.
It's not possible. The only way you can do it is, for example, what they do in the United States. If you have a school that's in an inner city where there are many poor people, they give a subsidy. And that subsidy should pay for tuitions for the children around there who are bright to go. That's how the schools who are in those, big communities in America get children from the inner city to go. So the government pays the subsidy. So if we are giving subsidies to private schools, it must be given to those children who are unable, but they are living in the neighborhood. It's easier to send your child, kind of neighborhoods to go to those private schools, but government must put in place a subsidy so that the subsidy pays for them to go to school until we can grow and upgrade our systems. I think the only other issue was electoral violence. I think all the other people just comments. The electoral violence is something that all of us must work upon. Nobody wants to live in a no man's land. As we go towards the by-elections being taking place in electoral district 15, and as we go towards 2020, Let's talk about the issues and let everybody go in an environment where they are able to vote freely. The Election Commission has a responsibility also to ensure that people have their schedules so that you will not have a fight, so that people can, campaign freely in certain areas. They did it for us in 2005, they did it in 2011, they did it in 2014, they did it in 2017. All of that work must be done before time. They are reneging on even helping with the civic and voters education. I'm one of those who believe that should be taken from Election Commission, like give it to somebody else who will be their duty every day to decide how we train our children. We need to put civics back in the schools so that children learn what it is, what democracy is, what do you look for, so we can grow to like other countries.
Please speak to the issue with ELBC. I mean, I have to.
Oh, yes. The issue of ELBC and Tottenham University. Again, as we look at the budget, I think ELBC provides government with a serious platform. Maybe we're not taking advantage of it. There are press briefings on Thursday at the Ministry of Information. I don't think it's enough. I think when you do a press briefing at the Ministry of Information, it just stays right there. That's why all the questions are coming out. This ELBC is the government's station to transmit information to people. I think government officials, the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Education, the Minister of Information should have the press briefings on the radio. Let's come talk about what we're doing. There are roads being done across our country. There are new financing for critical segments of the road that are being done. Nobody knows about it. So you hear somebody say, oh, nothing happening. There are some things that government is doing. You can imagine from the road from Bong to the end of Lofa. That road is already going on. Hopefully in a year or two it will be completed. The southeastern roads are being considered. Fundings are being put together. Projects are ongoing. A year from Fishtown to somewhere else, the road is paved. Who talks about it? So that people don't think nothing is happening.
And
there's a
also
lot
on
going
the budgetary side as well for support.
For all issues that we should have to talk about, I believe that ELBC, because you provide this singular platform that goes across the country, should be considered. I want to ask the director and the staff officials here at ELBC to begin to make their rounds, because the American people say it is the squeaky wheel that determines where the oil will go. So you can't sit here and just assume, because there are many competing needs. So during this period, people are overwhelmed. I know I was on the budget committee. You have to find somebody that will champion your cause, even though we all know the importance of the ELBC. Go start moving around the legislature, talking to people, the people who are over your sector. There's a committee over your sector, how you can get them to now champion it. There might be a small amount of money that we might be able to help, but I think some institutions like ELBC should be giving preference. But mind you, now we have schools, we have educational system, we have nurses, but information dissemination in this government is so important that ELBC cannot be left behind. But let me also ask the ELBC, there are other agencies that could give funding to help us. We have to go out there. What is the World Bank doing in terms of education, information and communications? Can a proposal be sent to them? They could consider it. What is the ADB doing in terms of that? What are the embassies doing? You'll be surprised that there is funding outside of government that you can access. So let's become proactive and begin to just move around. I've realized that even where I sit, when I get to a point where, I don't have money for something, then I have to think, where do I get money from? How does somebody help me raise the money? And sometimes there is a lot out there that we can access. So can we now work together and see what can be done? I can add my voice to it. If a proposal is done, explaining the need and making, so that the rationale makes sense, we can send it around to some of the embassies. We could find money in addition to the budget, because we know that this year the budget issues are really tight.
Well, it's been more than 2 hours now, and we'd like to say a big thanks to you, Madam Vice President, for taking some time out of your busy schedule to come here this morning and talk about a wide range of national issues. Thanks to JKP also for coming in and sharing with the platform with us this morning. It's been a pleasure having you, Madam Vice President.
And I want to say thank you, and before I leave, I want to just sound a message out. The Jewel Starfish Foundation, which is something that I've been working with for more than 20 years, is in the process of going across the country and paying fees. So I just want to ask the young people who are on that scholarship to be patient. We've set some teams out to the southeast already. Other people will be going to other parts of the country, and we ensure that those who are on our scholarship will go to school. If you can just be a little patient, you will get there, because it is a responsibility. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I am grateful.
Thank you very much, and so thanks to JKP for being here with me. Thanks to all of you for following. Thanks to everyone who made this presentation a success. I'm Daniel Ankadu. Have a wonderful time. I'll be back tomorrow morning, 6:30 to 10 o'clock. Have a great day from Painesville. Bye.